Welcome to the Retirement Resource Show, the place to come and live a retirement that is meaningful, fulfilling, and fun. We believe this phase of your life is the best time of your life. It's up to you. And we've got the show to get you there. Here's your host, Bo Henderson.
Welcome to the Retirement Resource. We're excited to continue this series on retirement clarity. What do we need to know about retirement beyond the spreadsheet? How do we plan for actual life plan in retirement? And I'm joined with Dee Warmath. Dee, thanks for continuing the conversation. Welcome to the show.
Sorry. Yes, thanks, Bo. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here talking about this with you.
Well, let's kind of summarize. We've been talking about this idea of retirement clarity, this actual retirement plan that we believe needs to be a focal point and put into place before you actually create a financial plan, right? And we kind of been breaking it down into aspects of how do we gain this retirement clarity. And we started with this research and insight into this benefits of living an engaged life in retirement, the importance of that, right? What are things we do? You had some great examples. I know we talked about quilting maybe, right? Volunteering. Could even be working just in a different capacity or part-time. Any other examples come to mind?
I think some people decide to write a book or to take up an instrument. You know, it could be anything that you've never had time to do in the past, something you used to do that you couldn't do during your working years. And so now you're going to bring it back. There's really a lot of different options.
Yeah. How do we live that? And the benefits of that, right? It sounds great. But we had our team doing research, and they brought to the table that it's not just good ideas or sounds good to be active in retirement. The research showed there was increased longevity, increased retirement satisfaction, and decreased cognitive decline. So some real big reasons that are concerns people have in retirement to live that engaged life. And then we went on to talk about, okay, it's like with most transitions we go through in life, there's usually some kind of a how-to. There's an onboarding manual, an owner's manual or something. And we really haven't found yet until the work we're doing, right? We're working on it. But that onboarding manual for how do I go from this career, this work, this life I've had and transition to what is a new phase. And that's what we call retirement. So how do I do it? How do I go about it? Again, it sounds great to say I need to have a plan for it, but can you give me some step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 to get me on the right track? So that's been a lot of fun, Dee, talking about that too, the onboarding manual.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the hardest part, right? I think that for some reason that step from working to retirement feels like for many people, the biggest one, the one that seems to have more fears than stepping, from not working into working had for us. And I really do think you're right, that it's having to take that step on your own, plan it on your own.
Right. And as we continued, we talked, there were some specific challenges and advantages that women face in retirement. And that those are some conversations that we believe need to be pulled out and had or discussed. And last time we were together, we talked about the importance of having this compelling vision, right? What does this look like? How do we get to that? And anything you want to add on the vision piece? That was a significant piece, I thought.
Yeah, I think so too. And like you and I have discussed, it's kind of interesting that we're sort of discovering retirement clarity and sort of fleshing it out as we go. And it really dawned on us in our conversations that, all of these things, the engaged living, the transition plan, everything really starts with that vision of who you're going to be in the stage of your life. And the more compelling that vision can be, the easier it is to put other things in place.
Love it. And as all this, we wanted to take this model or this approach that to me is kind of an educational framework. And we start with these concepts or ideas and bring awareness to it. We've been calling it the AAA approach. We want to bring awareness to some things or bring some data to light or even just share some ideas. And then when we're aware of things, maybe even new things, we can say, okay, with knowing what I know now, what adjustments might I need to make to move forward better, right? So awareness, adjustments. And the third, it's my favorite part, and I think the most crucial part, is now that I know this, know what I need to do is actually setting up and taking action. What are the actions I actually do and commit to move forward better now that I have this new insight? So as we proceed, I started this conversation with this idea of what if it goes wrong in retirement? And that might have made some people a little anxious, because that's one of the biggest fears I see is a lot of the bad things you hear about happening are because things weren't ever addressed or ever talked about or discussed or thought through. And a lot of that happens because the easier thing to do a lot of times, I think for most of us, is to put our head in the sand. I call it the ostrich with your head in the sand technique, very technical. But if it's different or if it's new, is just not deal with it. And then if we don't deal with it, we have to deal with it sometimes when something bad happens. So this whole concept, I'm kind of going on, but it's this idea, and Dee brought up this term, reflexive monitoring. So let's talk about, let's talk a little bit about where do we even start? What if we had a vision, we did the work to this point, right? We got clear on that really clear vision. But what if we get in there, Dee, and we're looking at it and we say, this isn't what I thought.
Yeah. And I think I think that kind of brings up the, when things go wrong, what does wrong mean, right? And I think that's that has an influence over what we're doing, and I think that this reflexive monitoring that we're going to talk about today can kind of help us understand what is wrong. Just a gut feeling there's something not right? Is it something feels out of alignment, or is it some barrier that's keeping me from going the direction that I wanted to go? There can be a lot of different definitions of wrong, and it goes back to what you were saying a second ago about it all starts with awareness.
And what about, it's hard enough to figure out what we want, this compelling vision, but we're humans and we're dealing with life, and there's external factors that can impact this, right? We have no control if we or somebody we care about gets sick. We have no control if there's relationship things that we didn't know about. We have sometimes some health issues can come up that could derail our thoughts and plans. I can think of just all kinds of things external, and sometimes that can, a plan. I laugh sometimes doing financial planning, because the one thing I know that'll make a plan fail is if we're so tied to the math that we're so rigid that we don't allow for flexibility or adjustments to be made. And it's the same thing with life, right? Because we can have the perfect plan that we're excited about and feel good about, but things happen, right? So I think that idea of flexibility going into retirement, meaning it's not necessarily when we're deciding these things, we're making these transitions, is it's not I picked right or I chose wrong. It's that mindset of flexibility says, hey, I learned that some things were wrong or not what I thought. Now what?
Yeah, and I think both remembering that what we're committing to is engaged living, not a specific way of engaged living. And it may be that whatever we thought was going to be right for us just doesn't feel right when we're doing it.
Right. And it reminds me, this was more in some coaching I had growing up, is that, everything's feedback, right? It's all feedback. It is even something that may seem like a failure or a negative, it gives us new information to move forward. One thing I can say is, growing up, before doing financial planning, retirement planning specifically, I tried a lot of jobs. A lot of people don't know this. I was a police officer. I worked in mental health. I tried a lot of jobs, and all of that gave me experience. And there was positive things I got from everything I ever did. But all those jobs also taught me that I was moving towards something that was the right fit for me. Right? I kept moving, and then I finally landed on what was my spot. So I think it's all feedback. The experience is feedback. But if you're not in motion, or you're not doing anything new, or you're not working towards this transition, it's hard to get new feedback if you're not doing anything new. Right. Another way I like to put it is, there was a example I've talked about a lot called life school. And one of the core foundations of that idea, that concept, is there's no mistakes, only valuable lessons. So it's okay. If it doesn't go the way I planned, that's great. Now I'm wiser, right? If it does go the way I planned, great. Let's keep that part and let's see what we might want to add to it.
And I think that ties very nicely, Bo, into reflexive monitoring, because that feedback, to be open to the feedback that experience is trying to give you, means that you are being reflexive and you are monitoring and paying attention to what's going on. You're not just barreling ahead. but you're also existing in that second plane where you're noticing your life and you're understanding what's going on in your life so that you can receive the feedback that your experience is willing to give you.
Right. And I think it's a mind shift to see that this is valuable. Right. It's not bad. It's valuable. And I think we were talking about this too, is that sometimes this transition to retirement, we're moving from something we've known, and sometimes it's something we've known for 30, 40 plus years, to an unknown. It might feel like that we're getting older. We might have some health things starting to show up, right? We might have kids now, grandkids now, staying at the house. Things are changing, right? So I think there's a lot of unknown in this phase of life. And you talk about leaving that 40-year career. One of the things I'll ask when I'm doing a live workshop around retirement planning topics is I'll ask, in this room, what percent of you or how many of you would say that your plan at this point for retirement is just to work until you die, right? And it kind of sounds funny, but any ideas how much of the room raises their hand? It's about a third. About a third of the room says, I plan to work till I die. And I'll ask why. And some might be what you think of. There's a certain percentage that's a financial necessity. I need to work to pay our bills. Okay. Some is if they're retiring a little earlier, it's I need to keep working to make sure we have health care. Or, here's one that's kind of interesting. And it shocks some people, but other people understand. I like to work. Right. And we've talked about that in some of our other topics. Some people feel that some of my purpose and my worth as a human is this thing I'm good at that I've done, and it provides value in the world. And if I retire and leave, I might not have that. I might not be a productive or a valuable person, or that feeling anyway. What else? I'm trying to think of some of the more that come. Some of the other. We talked about value, purpose.
The relationship one you talk about, I think, is really interesting in terms of I don't want to spend that much time with people in my life.
That's right. No, I'll get that one come up a lot too. Is I'm going to work because if I go home and drive my wife crazy, we're going to get a divorce, right? That's one of the funny ones that came up recently, right? So all that to say is that there's reasons we do things or don't do things, and there's some emotional connection to that, and there's no wrong or right answer, right? We kind of laugh about, wow, that sounds like the anti-retirement is to work until you die. But for some people, that's probably exactly what they should do. Maybe in a different capacity. I don't know, but there's no wrong or right answer here. And I think that's important too, Dee, because I imagine it's kind of like keeping up or doing what you're expected to do. I think a lot of discontent or what we do or don't do comes from what we think we're supposed to do, or what ideas of what retirement's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that you also hit on something a minute ago that's valuable. If I've gotten praise and my sense of belonging and my sense of competence from working, then right, I'm not sure I'm going to find that in retirement. Who's going to tell me that I did a good job? Who's going to give me a promotion? Know?
Yeah. And a lot of these too, you've worked somewhere for a significant period of time. A lot of your most important or closest or significant relationships are tied up in that employer, right? And sometimes when you leave to go do that next phase of life, those relationships don't transition the same way as they were when you were all together. Right? So I think that's another good question as we're having these conversations, and as we're moving forward, is you can think about retirement in a couple of ways. We're gaining some new things in this new phase, and we're also losing some things, right? And those are things to think about as we're thinking about how to move forward in this next step and what it's likely to be or what we want it to be. It reminds me of this idea of, you hear art and science. I think this planning for this retirement clarity concept, I think it's both art and science, right? And the science part, and I am the wrong person. You should be teaching the science part, I promise. But it reminds me of the science part of this, to me, is that it's like retirement. What we can build our initial vision off of is what we know, the context we have, the experience we have. So it's like having a hypothesis based on what I have and know right now. I believe that this idea, this thing will be the retirement that I'm looking to move towards, right? And then with a hypothesis, and you probably can fill in a lot of steps here, right? I'm just going off of memory of a long, long time ago. So we have a hypothesis, and then we're going to run a trial, or we're going to do an experiment. We're going to try it out. We're going to test it. So we test it, and then after we test it, we get results and we get feedback from that test, or data. How about we get data back from the experiment, so to speak. And then from that data, we can create the next hypothesis. And even if it was a negative outcome or not, see, this is where you can help me with the language. The hypothesis wasn't true, right? Then we have good information to try again with better information. So help me with that. I know I butchered the science language.
No, I think that was pretty good, Bo. And it's funny because you, while not using the language, you kind of dipped into Bayesian statistics, which would be rather advanced for a person
I did that on
stats
purpose.
in high school.
No, that was totally on purpose. Bayesian
Yeah,
statistics.
exactly.
Okay.
But I think you hit on the point that retirement shouldn't be a set it and forget it thing, right?
Mhm.
That you have to maintain that curious experimental approach that we've discussed throughout, and the focus has to be on, on engaged living, right? How do I get to engaged living? And what type of vision, what type of activity, what type of transition is going to get me to that engaged living? And I think that's where the reflexive monitoring really comes in. That way for you with all of your senses to tell whether things are working out for you. Like you said, whether your hypothesis of what you needed to be doing is going to be the right thing. Is this thing I picked the right thing to get me to engage living?
Right. And as we're focusing on that, and we've talked about reflexive monitoring, right? I like the term, but let's go ahead and let's dig into that a little more. Let's kind of spend this next piece going into what is it and what have we found out about it.
Yeah, so the way I became acquainted with reflexive monitoring was from the structuration theory of Anthony Giddens. And in that theory, he talks a lot about the individual actor, the agent. And he also talks about the structure. And I like to think about that either as, the playing field, so the field in football, and then you have the football players who take the stage. And so in retirement, we have our context, we have our situation, we have the structure that we're living in. And then we have the actions we take, the agency that we have in that structure. And so reflexive monitoring is really that person's ability to monitor their actions, to be aware of how what they're doing is influencing their engaged living. And I apologize. I'm at school today, and so if you hear background noise, that's I picked a quiet corner that very quickly became not a quiet corner.
So live from the University of Georgia.
Live at the University of Georgia.
There you go.
So reflexive monitoring really refers to that person's ability to see what's happening and to be able, like you were saying before, become aware and then to identify ways to adjust. The really interesting thing about reflexive monitoring, I think, is that it leads automatically to greater self-awareness and engagement. So that as you monitor and you learn, like you were talking about before, you start to find new ways to engage. You start to realize what's keeping you from engagement and what you could do to get greater engagement. And then one other very interesting thing is that reflexive monitoring also gives you a greater sense of control, because you start to see what you could do differently and how you can take control of your retirement, how retirement clarity is up to you. And so, making sure that as you get into retirement and you're enacting your plan, you're bringing to life your vision, that you remember that this is under your control and you get to say how and when and what and everything else, and you get to make those changes.
So reflexive. So this brings up another. I talked a lot in the past about this idea of sleepwalking. The whole idea of this whole conversation of living a rich life in retirement or a fulfilling retirement was when I was much younger. I just stepped back and I started noticing that it looked like so many people were just going through the motions, reacting and responding to life, sleepwalking through the day. And as you're talking about this reflexive monitoring, it's the anti-sleepwalking solution, right? Because you're actually taking in feedback. You're aware of that. And now you have the power. I love that. Now you're empowered to do something about it. Because I see a big shift when I'm a proactive, intentional player in my life versus I'm going through this hard, crazy life that all this stuff happens to me. Big shift.
And very important shift for engaged living, It does speak to the fact that in retirement, you probably shouldn't be that person who's just going along somebody else's plan. You need to be thinking about what is it you want, what brings you joy, what helps you feel engaged, so you can reap all the benefits that you talked about earlier.
Right. So as we go through, so reflexive monitor, so it sounds like would you call it a skill? I think it's almost a skill, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a skill, and I think it's that willingness to sort of disengage for a minute from your activities
Right.
and to be that kind of like at that 30,000-foot view, just looking at what's going on, almost like you're watching your life so that
Mm.
you can see what's working and what isn't.
Yeah. Reflection. I like it. So we've got this skill to develop, this concept that I mean, what we talk about retirement being a time when a lot of people feel like they lose control. We're talking about a tool to gain it back, to empower you. So I see the benefit. I see why this makes sense and where we're trying to go with this retirement clarity. But it's like every other thing. Now that we've got this idea, we've made the case for it. How do we do it? Where do we start? Uh,
Yeah, and one of the things that you and I've talked about is that maintaining that sense of the fact that it is your retirement and
right.
that retirement clarity is something that has to be cultivated. And then I think taking the time, I think it's setting intentional points in your
Mhm.
week, in your day, where you stop and you have something on your calendar, or you just have a natural, when you're brushing your teeth, or when you first sit down to eat, or, before you go to bed, whatever your time is, where you just spend some time thinking about the day. And not necessarily everything that happened in the day, but the things that you felt should be a part of your engaged living. And you consider, did I feel engaged in that activity? And you start to consider, what was it that kept me from being engaged and feeling engaged in that activity, and asking yourself some questions about what could have made it better. Is this the right activity for me? Do I have ideas about how I do this particular approach to engaged living differently? Or, like you were saying earlier, do I have a new hypothesis and something else that I'd like to try?
And I think a tool I see a lot in a lot of different programs, a lot of different journaling is that evening reflection. I've had periods where I did it and I found it very valuable, and it's a habit that as I'm thinking about it, I probably need to do more. But it's taking like you were saying, D, is at the end of the day, what happened today? Pull some things from it. What did I not like? What didn't go great? What did? Any insights from that? And that's it. Take 5 minutes maybe. But I think that could be some how-tos of how do we start this process, and then we could put it in the blank. What did I learn today as it pertains towards my transition into retirement, or my happiness, or my health, or whatever it is we're trying to get this clarity on. So I love that idea of maybe that's a worksheet or something we could add to this system, so to speak, is just kind of the evening 5-minute debrief and a practice of exercising this reflexive monitoring and building that muscle. Because if it's a skill, it's going to be one of those things you're going to get better at it the more you do it, right? So,
And I love that idea. And I would add one idea to it, Bo, that like
mhm.
if you had evening reflections each day of the week, and then maybe on the last day of the week, you reflected on your reflections. And
Ah,
so you could start to say, what are some of the patterns in the reflections that I had during the week, and what can I learn from them to take into the next week?
right. No, yeah. If I see you said it, patterns, right? If I see the same kind of thing I'm not liking coming up 4 out of the last 7 days, maybe that's something that needs a little more focus, right? To look at. Do I want to adjust it if it had this negative thought? So that's great. So let's so this reflexive monitoring, I think it's a key component. And if we go to the model, if we can pull up the model, the retirement clarity model here, you notice that this is a very kind of like we talked about, almost like the science experiment. This is a model that's ongoing. Right? We go on. And the reflexive monitoring, and D, if you'd like to talk through the whole model a little bit, but to me, we're getting to the reflexive monitoring today. That is the check the data, look at the results, think about it and make any adjustments to go back through to adjusting that next phase, which is our updated 2.0, 3.0, 7.0 compelling vision, right?
Exactly. And so it really, like, hopefully your retirement life and your retirement clarity is driven by this compelling vision, and that vision gets translated into a specific plan for engaged living. And then that plan has some kind of transition onboarding, some intentional way of starting it. And then when you get into that plan, you're executing the plan, engaging in the reflexive monitoring to make sure it's right, and then using what you learn through the reflexive monitoring to come back around to the compelling vision and executing that cycle all over again. And knowing that retirement clarity, again, isn't like a set it and forget it. It's more like a spinning plate, right? And making sure that that plate stays in the air and stays exactly how you want it to be.
And right, and retirement clarity it goes for what we're trying to do is we're creating our first vision, transitioning to retirement. But retirement it evolves, and you have new insight, new experiences, new circumstances. So retirement clarity is always new, which is kind of exciting, right? Because we're going into this phase where it seems like maybe some things are behind us now, but when we utilize this process, it's always new, and it's our job, really, the way I see it, is to learn and practice this way to honor the engaged living in our life, and it's continually updated. So you're continually upgrading yourself, updating yourself, and hopefully what this would lead to, from what our data shows, the research shows, is increased retirement satisfaction, which the way I simply interpret retirement satisfaction, or one component of that, is happiness. And one thing I can tell you is that if you cut through what people want, this, but why, I think it's happiness. They want to be happy, right? Happy in life, happy in retirement, happy in relationships. So I think we're kind of on as we've worked through this, talked through this, took some initial ideas and developed them. I think we're on the path on how to actually do this thing that we talked about, that there hasn't been an owner's manual on. How do we even take step one to move towards our future, this next phase with retirement clarity? It's been exciting for me, and I appreciate all your help.
Absolutely. Oh, it's been fun. It's been really fun to talk with you about this and to sort of let the ideas emerge and emerge through our conversations on these shows.
Yes, and I'm going to go ahead and tell our listeners, our viewers and listeners, this too, is one of our goals with this is, I don't believe, being in this industry for a long time, and I know Dee feels the same way, is that this component of retirement planning is done, or done properly, or done in a way. Everything I see, there's some language that, hey, it's important to understand your life, but I don't see it integrated to where the financial plan is built honoring this retirement clarity in this life plan. And one of our goals, Dee, I don't know if you wanted me to say this, so we can chop it off later if you don't want to. But we want to, for me, it's a goal to have an impact as we're sharing these things, and to have a new generation of retirement planning professionals be equipped with this kind of training, this kind of planning, this kind of coaching, this kind of financial planning moving forward, so that we can continue to move to people living that next phase of their life lit up, engaged, having fun, and having the best years of their life. So it's exciting to me, and I think we're onto something to have a lot of impact here. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Next time we're going to get together, we've been breaking it down by component, right? We talked about the engaged living, the onboarding planning, the compelling vision we already talked about, and we talked about reflexive monitoring today. We spent the bulk of the time on that. We're going to get back together, and we're going to kind of do a summary show, and we're going to talk about kind of A, B, C, D, E, what you need to know, kind of linear model for this retirement clarity concept, even though it's a circular model, right? So look forward to it. See you next time, Dee. Appreciate all your help and insights and research. And thank you guys for listening. Let us know what's been helpful, what you need further clarity on, and what other shows you might want to hear us talk about when it comes to this very important transition from working life, career, all the stuff that you've done to this point, to this next phase, which I believe should be and can be the best phase of your life. See you next time, same place, right here on the Retirement Resource. See you guys.